All right, Jax, you're up.
Jax.
Turn it loose.
Oof, oof, oof. I'm ready. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
Amen.
Nice job.
Good job.
All right. Time is here, 8:04. No, we're not doing too bad. So, what do we got? 17? Fair. All right. So, last week we started with that new way I was doing it using Prezi. And one of the things that were brought up is that it might be better if you guys can see me while we're doing this, because maybe some people are a little more comfortable talking to a person than a voice. So I'm going to try it a different way this time. They got a bunch of different templates. So
I talk to voices all the time.
I know you do.
Once in your head.
I know you do. So here we go. So we're going to try this way. We're going to try it with me on the side and where everything else is going to be on the right side, which is why I was a little off center. I should be good now, right?
Mhm.
So is it showing me just centered on the flag?
You're looking good.
No, I know that. I mean, but how's the video looking? All right. All right. So that's what we'll do. We'll give this a shot. We'll see how this one goes. Maybe you guys will like this one better. So,
Jim,
yep.
I hope one of you can help me. I don't know what I did, but I've got the big, just a Zoom screen in the background. And then you're on top, you're about 4 inches wide and about 6 inches long with everybody's picture in it in the middle of my screen.
Yeah. So if you go up on the
View?
top right where it says speaker view,
I just have view. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, click on that.
Yep.
Okay. Gallery view, speaker view.
if you
Click
go
on
to speaker, yep. If you go to speaker view, then anybody who's talking is going to take up your whole screen.
All it did is reduce it to me and you. I'm in the top of you and you're on the bottom. Let me just see, hold on. See if I can mess this up more. Up, there we go. I got you.
Got it?
Yeah, I had it. Yeah, I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it.
You sure?
Thank you.
All
Yep.
right. All right. So since we're moving on to a new article, which they're going to go pretty quick now. Like next week, Article 5 is only one section, right? There's not going to be like Article 1 where took us forever because there were so many sections and so many clauses. So today we're going to be getting into Article 4. We're going to get all the way through it. So we'll go over our progress again real quick, just to remind everybody. So far, we had Article 1, which established the legislative branch, set up Congress for us, gave Congress the authority of what they can do and what they can't do, gave them the authority basically to make the laws and to control the money. Article 2 was the executive branch, which set up the president, vice president, his cabinet, and spelled out what their duties are. Last week, Article 3, the judicial branch, when we got through that, that set up the court system. So right now, government's set up, right? Everything we've gone through, Article 1, 2, and 3, the government is set up. Everything else that we're going to talk about now, like today, we're talking about the states. Tomorrow or next week will be the amendment process. Article 6 is, I don't know, there's a whole bunch of things covered in it, but oaths and things like that. But as far as government goes, it's set up now. So this is it. So we'll get into today, which is going to be Article 4, which covers the states. And we'll get right into it unless somebody has something. Does anybody have any questions? Anything, any discussion, anything that needs to be talked about before we go? Jeff, how's this? You like this better?
Yeah, that works.
Better than last week, you think?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, this is the way we'll do it then. So Article 1, Section 1. Full faith and credit shall be given in each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state. And the Congress may, by general laws, prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. So the full faith and credit clause. So the purpose of this clause, basically, the biggest purpose is to establish that every state abides by court judgments from other states. Prior to the Articles of Confederation, a debtor could just flee to another colony. And once he was found there, they had to go all the way through the whole court process again. They had to try him, they had to find him guilty. And then if he left again and went to a different colony, they found him there. They had to do the whole thing over again and again and again. And it also protects public acts. So public acts, anybody have any idea what a public act would be? Anything? Nobody? I'm just gonna be quiet until somebody answers. I know David Davis will eventually save everybody.
Like,
That would
like,
be like an act of Congress, right?
Not gonna do it. Not gonna do it.
Not an act of Congress, it's a public act, all right? So it's protected. So basically what it's doing is a public act is gonna be something like marriage, right? Adoption of kids, things like that. So what this is basically doing is protecting you. If you were to get married here, you were to adopt some kids here in Ohio and you move to Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania has to recognize that marriage. They have to recognize that adoption. Can't go over there with your adopted kids that you legally adopted in Ohio. Pennsylvania's like, we don't do things this way. Those aren't your kids. So that's what this is doing. That's what this is protecting here.
That's similar to driver's licenses then?
What's that?
Similar to driver's licenses?
Right. Driver's license, same thing, right? I mean, we have
What
to
about-
accept driver's license. I know where you're going.
Does carry. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know I was
Here
going
we
there.
go. Here we go. And that's going through. I mean, that's being challenged. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's being challenged. We'll see.
It just seems like if it's similar to a marriage license or a driver's license, it should be automatically accepted in that state. Now, granted, in other states, you have to know their driving laws when you go there. Right turns on red in certain states not allowed. Roundabouts and things like that are awkward for some people.
With the exception of equipment, like window tint. Tint's a big thing.
Yeah.
They
Right.
defer back to Ohio for that. They don't expect you to put new window tint on your car every time you go into a different state. Yeah, I mean, CCW, I guess my only thing with that would be, I mean, some states don't accept CCW. It's
Right.
not
Right.
legal in some states.
Yeah,
So
that's
just because
odd.
Ohio says it's legal, it's not legal in another state. I don't think you can just take, laws like that. And now, I mean, the constitutionality aside of whether it's legal or it's not legal.
So if say like Utah decided to ban cars and say we're not going to allow cars anymore, once you cross the state line, you have to hop on a horse and buggy.
Hey, fun fact, in Oberlin, Ohio, it's illegal to drive a horseless carriage downtown. That law is still on the books.
So it's illegal to drive cars downtown?
Seriously, it still is. That law is still on the books.
Well, that's so when the Amish get drunk downtown, they don't turn their buggies into rickshaws.
I
We
know,
don't get very many Amish in downtown Oberlin.
I know a lot of Oberlin cops. I'm gonna have to talk to somebody and have somebody charge somebody with driving a car downtown.
That'd be pretty fun.
I think that's the quickest
I
way.
knew it was still on the books. If they've
That's the-
changed it, I don't know it.
That's the quickest way to get rid of it. Just charge somebody with it.
Hey, my Utah thing was actually, I mean, I was kind of being serious though, because like say you're going on a cross country trip and you drive into and you carrying your concealed carry with you, and you drive through a state and you happen to get pulled over that doesn't allow concealed carry. And can they say, well, you shouldn't have been driving? It's like, well, what am I gonna do? Turn around and go back home and drop it off so I can drive through your state?
Have you,
No,
have
but
you not,
you would need to
you never seen
conform with
any of the
their
new-
laws.
you haven't seen any of the news from
Could
New
you
Jersey?
do that?
Well, it's up to you. It's incumbent upon you to know the laws. It's not incumbent upon them to make sure you know them, right? So you need to know the laws. So if you're driving into Illinois and they say, look, man, we don't allow concealed weapons here. Here's what you have to do to make it legal. Then you're gonna have to stop somewhere prior to Illinois, take it out, put it in the trunk, keep the ammo separate, that kind of thing,
That's exactly what you have to do for Illinois too.
Okay, all right,
Right.
that makes sense.
Right.
That's why
Nobody,
they
nobody
sell
is,
those reciprocity guides,
Yep.
nobody is forcing you to drive through that state.
right.
You could go around it.
I didn't see the Second Amendment coming into this. I should have seen this coming. I didn't see it.
Sorry.
Come
Sorry.
on.
Oh, it's all right. I should have seen this coming. I
All
should-
right,
I
Jim,
actually thought
back
about
to
the
your
driver's
marriage.
license thing.
Back to your marriage example, though. Remember when same-sex marriage started in Massachusetts? They said, "Oh no, we're not going to try and force this on anybody else in the country." But you knew full well as soon as somebody moved out of Massachusetts into another state, it was going to be a problem because the other state didn't recognize the marriage. So, and of course, the Supreme Court has settled on that in the meantime. But yeah,
Well-
you knew that was going to affect every other state
Sure.
once Massachusetts passed it, for example.
Yep.
Well, it's no different than when interracial marriage became legal in some states and some states said, hell no. It's the same thing. If you went from
Yep.
one state that okayed it to a state that didn't, you would have got hung.
Now, the problem is once the Supreme Court got involved and the Supreme
Then
Court
it-
said,
yeah.
look, you absolutely cannot stop this. Now it applies to all 50 states. That's where this comes in. It's not by state law. Don't get confused with state law. We're talking about things that the federal government says are legal. When it's legal in Ohio, it's legal in Pennsylvania, it's legal everywhere. And this is almost, if you read the second half of this, is almost verbatim from Article 9 of the Articles of Confederation. The only thing that was added was public acts because that wasn't in there. And they gave Congress the authority to prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved.
So the concealed carry is you can cross that into the same realm as you're coming from Colorado where you're allowed to have recreational marijuana and you go into, I don't know what states don't allow it, Utah.
Utah.
Well, sure.
You get pulled over there, whether you're
Yeah,
concealed.
well, Ohio's like that, right?
Right.
Medical, you cannot have vegetable marijuana in the state of Ohio. Now you can come out of Michigan with it, with whatever it is they allow, an ounce, 2 ounces. And we've stopped people that say, hey, look, I got a card from Michigan says I'm allowed to have it. Well, you know what? Sorry, man, you're not allowed to have it in Ohio. So you'll get arrested for it here. I mean, it's still incumbent upon you to know their laws, but what we're talking about here are things like marriage, adoption, things that are settled law.
Sorry, Jim. We just like to talk about guns and weed.
I know.
Guns, weed, and booze.
All right.
So
Just
federally recognized public acts.
Public
I think
acts.
that's probably the better way to say it. So the second part of that is giving Congress the power to determine how states recognize records and laws from other states. So, like an
Wayne
example,
commented, what about protein?
how states got to handle child custody disputes. Like if you win a lawsuit here against somebody in Michigan, or somebody in Michigan wins one from you, that it's all that's binding, right? That just because they're in Michigan doesn't mean that they get to skate out on this thing. So that's section 1. So we'll move into section 2. A little bigger. First clause is the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. Clause 2 is a person charged in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of that state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed from the state having jurisdiction of the crime. Clause 3, which was modified by the 13th Amendment and no longer applies, but we'll read it since we're talking about the Constitution, was no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping onto another, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due.
That sounds like it's referencing slavery.
It's 100% slavery.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. We'll talk about it. We're going to go through each clause here. So when we get into clause 1, which is citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. Now you read this and you're probably, some of you guys are thinking, well, shit, didn't we just talk about this? But what was in section 1 was protecting you from things that happened in your state when you went into other states. You were still given those protections, those immunities going into another state. What this is doing is saying that if you're in Ohio and you decide you want to move to Pennsylvania and buy property, you're allowed to do that. If you are in Ohio and you decide you want to go to Pennsylvania and get married, you're allowed to do that. You're entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in every state, right? With very few exceptions. And there's one big exception. There may be more, but there's one that I'm thinking of Can you think of anything where this would not apply, where you are not entitled to the privileges and immunities of those states? So if we were going to leave Ohio, you're going into a different state, what would you not be allowed to do there that you're allowed to do in Ohio?
Concealed carry.
Marry a minor.
What's that?
Marry a minor.
Oh my goodness, we're not.
Vote,
Vote.
vote if
Oh
you're a
my.
felon.
That's the one I'm thinking. Vote,
Vote.
right? You've
Vote
got to be a
if you're a
resident
felon.
of that state, so they're allowed to dictate some things, but for the most part, and there's very, very few exceptions. You get all the Mike, what? Marry a minor?
What do you think? All the jokes came out of West Virginia and Kentucky.
He said carry a minor over the border, just carrying, not marry.
Oh, carry a minor.
I heard Mary.
I heard Mary.
That's what I thought I heard.
Renee, we got to
Oh,
get.
boy,
back-
guys.
So
Got some weird
this
friends.
clause establishes that every citizen in the United States has the same rights in every other state as they do in their home state. I mean, we talked a little bit about this. We take this clause for granted for sure, but how much different would life be without this clause, right? I mean, without this clause, states could stop you at their border and say you don't have the right here.
Come
You don't
through.
have the right to travel through the state.
Yep.
They could set up checkpoints. I mean, we're no longer the United States at this point. It would be all independent states. It'd be like having all 50
Separate states of
countries.
America.
Right. Right. So,
Different countries.
Can we do that? What's it take to become that?
well, there is one state that, well, we'll talk about them.
Texas secession.
There is one state that could.
Texas.
Well, I don't know about the secession part. We're going to talk about Texas. There's a little interesting fact I learned about Texas here when I was researching all this stuff that I never knew. Pretty cool. So clause 2, a person charged with in any state with treason, felony, or other crime who shall flee from justice and be found in another state shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. And does
Extradition.
everybody understand what this is?
Extradition.
Extradition.
Correct.
Pick
So,
up radius.
so what the way it used to be was that the governors, one governor would tell the other governor, I found this guy, he's in your state, we want him back. That governor in the other state, pick him up, drop him off to the governor in the state in which the crime had occurred. Now it goes through the courts. But as it goes through the courts, they're only allowed to look at 2 questions when it comes to extradition. If you commit a crime in Ohio and you flee to Kentucky, Kentucky finds you there, you fight extradition, the courts are only allowed to address 2 issues. And those issues, well, first, I guess this clause covers extradition for crimes only. Civil violations, private debts are not included. And they were pretty clear on that, treason, felony, and other crime. So the only 2 issues that the courts are allowed to look at are whether the fugitive has been charged with a criminal violation and whether the fugitive was present in the demanding state when the crime occurred. That's it. And they need to ascertain if the subject that you want is actually a subject. If you're saying you're going after Joe Smith and they want to make sure this isn't Bob Jones that they have in front of the court. But other than that, the only 2 things that they are allowed to raise are whether or not he's been charged with a violation of criminal law and whether or not he is present in the state when the crime was committed. That's it. They're not allowed to talk about evidence. They're not allowed to talk about the elements of the crime. They're not allowed to talk about any of that. That is all for the demanding state and their court system to go through. And
It's interesting that it doesn't include private debts. So if you had taken somebody to court for damages to your house because they were doing repairs or something, and then they left and moved to Pennsylvania, you may not be able to get them to pay up on that.
well, no, because if you remember
No.
what we just talked about in section 1, that's where we set up the fact that you can still sue them. The court here can rule against them and they're still going to be on the hook for it, right? That's what we just talked about, is that,
They just don't have to be extradited back.
right, you're just not going to extradite somebody over a civil violation.
All right, I
You're
got
still going to get notice, and if you don't show up, then they find in lieu and they fine for the plaintiff on it. And there's still going to be, every state still has to recognize court rulings from other states. So
Gotcha.
yeah, you're still
Okay.
going to get your money. There's no way out of that. They're just not going to they're just not going to grab a guy, jerk him out of bed and send him back here because he owes you $150 on a bad deck that he put in. You know what I mean?
Right. Gotcha.
So-
Yep. That makes sense.
Yep. Anything else? Discussion? Questions? Moving quick? Too quick?
Good. No.
Should.
No, it's
Well,
pretty
we're
cut
gonna
and dry.
We're going to be done here at 8:40. This is going to be fantastic. We haven't had an early night yet. But these things are getting,
Jinx.
what's that?
Jinx.
Jinx this. Yep.
These things are getting shorter and shorter, the clauses are. Or the articles are. So we're probably going to have, and tomorrow or next week with Article 5, we'll probably go a little long on that, but it's pretty easy to whip through these things now. So clause 3 is no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such service or labor may be due. So this was 100% slavery, right? This was slaves that escaped out of the South. They moved into the northern states where slavery had been abolished, and they were found here. What they're saying is, look, man, there's no home base rule, right? Just because you cross a state line doesn't mean that your service and labor requirements are discharged from the slave owner. He still owns you. And if he comes up and says, I found Joe Smith, he's my slave, and he can prove it, then Joe Smith has to go back forthwith.
What about Canada? Was that Canada didn't count if they made it?
Well, I don't know. I
Canada,
think if
right?
they made it, well, and that's what the Underground Railroad was all about, right? It was getting them out of
Right,
the
yeah.
country. So yeah, once they were into Canada, I mean, that's a whole different realm here. Remember, the Constitution only affects the United States. It doesn't affect Canada. They're not required to abide by our Constitution at all. So, and that's what the whole Underground Railroad was. Now, this whole thing, none of it matters anymore, obviously, because the 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction, which effectively got rid of everything that has to do with slavery in the Constitution. With clause 3, the entire clause being removed. Still there, but it's been removed from law. So we were a nasty place there for a little while. Luckily, we grew out of that. Where are we at? What's funny about that?
We're still growing.
Oh, well, no, we are. Well, it depends who you talk to, right? I mean,
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, we are still growing, but I think we're doing pretty good.
We are,
Move on.
many of us feel like we are doing better. So we need to move on because that's
Certainly the freest country in the world, without a doubt. Article 4, Section 3. And that is going to the two clauses here. Clause 1 is that new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as of Congress. Clause 2 is the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or any particular state. So what we're talking about here is adding new states. Clause 1. We just read it. We don't have to go back over it again, but this is where we're adding new states. So this section gives Congress the authority to add states to the United States as long as no new state is formed within another state, meaning that LA can't break off and become another state. They can't become the 51st state. New York City can't become the 52nd state, right? They can't break off and form a new and separate state within a state. Two or more states could form a new state from parts of each state with the consent of each legislature and of Congress. So if Ohio wants to concede 200 miles of land, Michigan wants to concede 200 miles of land, and they want to create a new state, they can do that, but they need the consent of Michigan's legislature. They need the consent of Ohio's legislature. Then Congress has to look at it and give their blessing. As long as all three of those things happen, they can make a new state. I don't ever see this ever happening again.
Woody Hayes would probably roll over in his grave and come back to life if that happened.
He's probably alive right now just because we're talking about it.
Did see something recently though. I guess Texas for a while had the ability to do such. There's something I read, Smithsonian Magazine, 1921. I guess New England. Something about 5 states. Let's see where. In terms of Texas 1845 admission to the Union, argued the state could
Right.
split
All right.
anytime
Just
without
stop.
any
You're
action
going to
from
take my
Congress.
thunder. That's next.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. That's the cool thing. That's the cool
Yeah.
thing I was talking about. So what you're talking about is a resolution of the joint resolution of annexation of Texas, 1845. When we took Texas, after they got their independence. Now, Texas was an independent state. They were at that time their own entity. We annexed them, and as part of that annex, what we said was that new states of convenient size, this is part of the joint resolution. This is what we agreed to with Texas as part of the annexation. We said that new states of convenient size not exceeding 4 in number, in addition to said state of Texas, and having sufficient population may hereafter, by the consent of said state, be formed out of the territory thereof, which shall be entitled to admission under the provisions of the federal constitution, and such states as may be formed out of the territory lying south of the 36 degrees 30 minutes north latitude, commonly known as the Missouri Compromise line, shall be admitted into the Union with or without slavery. Now, obviously, none of this 13th Amendment is going to have done away with all of this. With or without slavery, as the people of each state asking admission shall desire, and in such state or states as shall be formed out of said territory north of said Missouri Compromise line, slavery or involuntary servitude, except for crime, shall be prohibited. So the question here, and it's pretty interesting, a lot of what I was reading, the question is whether Texas right now could act unilaterally and create 4 separate states within their state. Because according to this, they can. According to the joint resolution for annexing Texas, which has never been changed, says that they do have the right, where is it? Hereafter, by the consent of said state. Nowhere does it say anything about Congress. It says basically as long as Texas decides they want to split into 4 separate states, that they can do that. So we could have 54 states here almost immediately. If Texas
53.
decided they wanted to do that.
53, right, Jeff?
Yeah, 53.
So, well, I don't know. Is it new states of convenient size not exceeding 4 in number in addition to said state of Texas?
Oh, you're right. So
So
you can
it's-
chop off 4 separate chunks of it. And
Correct. So it's 5 states in addition to said state of Texas.
4. So you'd end up, you're right, 54.
Right. So it'd be 5.
As long as it's south of the Missouri Compromise line.
Well, the Missouri Compromise line is only dealing with slavery. Right? So if you get down there and you read that, north of the Missouri Compromise line shall be admitted in the Union with or without slavery. They were still allowing slavery, as the people of each state asking admission shall desire.
Yeah, that's all the 36 degree was only about slavery anyway.
Ah, okay.
Now, if you were north of the, where are we here? Let's see. I'm sorry, lying south of the 36, right? So if you were north, now you're
You weren't
north of
allowed.
the Missouri Compromise line, and slavery was already outlawed at that point for them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm reading here, early 1845, when Congress debated Texas's admission, Northern congressmen wanted to divide Texas in half, splitting the state in half diagonally from the coast east of Corpus Christi up to the state's northwest corner, with Austin just to the east and San Antonio to the west. Slavery would be prohibited in thinly populated West Texas, where many anti-slavery Germans had already settled.
So I mean, that would really throw a monkey wrench in the whole thing, right? And so if Texas saw that their demographic, that their political demographics were changing, that people were coming out of California and they were turning that state blue, could they decide to carve out 4 more states?
Kind of
It
wish. they
sounds
would.
like it.
It does sound like it, and that would be amazing. I
Make
mean,
it- make a little donut hole in the middle there for Houston.
right? I mean, and when I say amazing, I don't mean amazing like, I mean, that would be an amazing turn of events.
It's astonishing.
I mean, you
It's what
really,
it
and think about right now what the current administration wants to do, right? They want to make DC a state. They want to make Puerto Rico a state, and they're bringing them in for votes. Could Texas negate that entire thing? Could that happen and Texas say, you know what? We're adding 4 more.
That would give each one of those states 2 more representatives in Senate,
Correct.
and
Senators and whatever.
then their House representatives will be based off of population. So
Correct.
wouldn't
Now-
the House? But that really wouldn't change the number of House representatives, because the Texas's House of Representatives would go down,
Right.
because the others would go up.
Yeah,
based
but they
on
could have
population.
8 senators.
Yeah, the way I conceptualize it is like if they did a state right up and down I-35 here, you'd get San Antonio, Austin, all the way up to Dallas, Fort Worth, and that would be like the liberal state of Texas, essentially. And then you'd have like Houston on the far east, that's a big city, and like that one strip could be just like almost like California at this point because of everybody migrating here to Austin, San Antonio.
And that would be amazing, because that one sliver would only have 2 representatives,
2 senators, but
two senators.
that one
So
sliver would get most of the House of Representatives, and that would be worth more in the electoral college. So that's where like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't thing.
Now, you don't hear anybody talking about it, so I don't know if it's even a thing right now, but according to this, I mean, it certainly could be a thing.
Yeah, I've heard people in Texas seem.
Oh, I bet people in Texas are talking about it.
Well, they're not talking about it's splitting into different states, but they talk about more about anything seceding and becoming their own state again.
I don't know how they could do that.
I don't either.
The government's not going to let them secede. It's just, they're not going to do it. Because the problem is then you let them secede and all of a sudden Massachusetts decides they're seceding, and, you know,
Yeah.
I don't see any legal precedent for them to be able to secede. I'm just looking up real quick.
They'd have to have their own dollar to do that too, and they're not going to do that.
Bitcoin?
We wouldn't let him. We wouldn't let them use the dollar if they seceded.
Bitcoin?
All right, so in 18
They take the US dollar in Canada. You kidding me?
in 1828, the definition of convenient, it's pretty much the same now, is suitable, proper, adapt to use or to want, followed by 2 or 4, usually by 4. All right, so suitable, proper, adapted to use or to wants. So, you know, it doesn't say, it says new states of convenient size. It does not say of equal size. So it's not like they have to divide Texas up into 4 equal parts. I mean, they could make one tiny, one huge, one medium. They could make just a strip across the north. I mean, it sounds like they could do whatever they wanted here. They could basically gerrymander their state with new states. Right? Am I reading that right?
No, you're right. They would gerrymander the way to 8 more U.S. Senate seats and electoral college votes as well too.
Right. I mean, that's the way I read it. It doesn't say equal.
Nope.
They could just carve out the most conservative sections of this state and make them all brand new states. So
Looks
just
like
something to think about, something interesting I never knew.
Honestly, the
But you know
size
what?
of it,
Leave it to
convenient, right?
Texas. Leave it to Texas for some crazy shit like this, right?
right.
And
So it
the
looks like
size-
the last one that really brought this up was 2009. As Nate Silver drew up a fantasy 5-way split, created 3 Republican mini Texases, a blue state along the Rio Grande, and a swing state around Austin. The 2004 Texas Law Review paper, and it mentioned about the way to gerrymander their way to 8 more U.S. Senate seats. Response from Ralph Brock, former State Bar of Texas Director, argued that the new states clause would violate the Supreme Court's equal footing doctrine.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, and now that makes me wish I had spent a little more time on equal footing.
Yeah, I think it's important to see, like, it's only new states, so anything that happened after Texas would be eligible for this, but not anything, like nothing east of Mississippi, essentially. That's how I read this.
There is, so what, man, I wish I had, I'll have to look it up. I don't want to give out wrong information here, but I think it was along the lines of basically there was nothing in the Constitution that guaranteed equal footing to anybody. And the framers purposely left equal footing out of it. They thought about it and ultimately they left it out. Right after this, it was Kentucky and Massachusetts, maybe Maine. There were two states right after the Constitution came that were admitted into the Union, and the Supreme Court gave them equal footing, basically set precedent. Even though, am I blurry there? Even though they fought against having equal footing put in. So I'll have to look it up. But there's nothing in the Constitution that promises that. But there is obviously precedent set now. So, all right, moving on. What time is it? 8:39. Yeah, see, we're going to get done with this quick. Clause 2. Now, there's a lot to this clause. I'm going to go over it generally, but man, we could read for weeks on this. All right, this is the territories. Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States, and nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or any particular state. So basically, Congress has the power to sell or regulate our territories or property that it owns. It gives Congress the authority to govern federal territories like Puerto Rico. However, we have always let them govern themselves. But by the Constitution, there's nothing stopping Congress from coming in here, the federal government, sorry, from coming in here and taking over and doing their own thing. Now, no matter what happens, they still fall under parts of the Constitution, right? Puerto Rico doesn't enjoy the full force of the Constitution. They enjoy most of it. And one of those was obviously going to be Article 1, Section 7, lawmaking. So Congress can't just go in there and run roughshod over them. They still have to be following the Constitution. Man, am I blurry or is it just me?
No,
But you,
Just
you're
you.
good. You're good.
Okay.
It's clear.
David Davis is blurry.
David was worried.
It's dark
And-
down here.
Black Becky's blurry too.
Black Becky.
You say Black Betty?
That's me.
Lamb.
And
Lamb.
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 Amble, amble.
See, anybody who's not from the last week and missed this whole thing is going to be.
And speaking of which, you're supposed to open up with that song.
I know. I forgot all about it. I will. I will. All right. So anyway,
Remembered, but I did not.
getting back to the territories. Something interesting that I always knew we owned a lot. That 30% of the land of the United States is owned by the federal government. 30%.
Wow.
And 80% of land in Nevada is owned by the federal government. It's crazy to me.
Those national parks that take up the majority.
Not just national parks. I mean, Bureau of Land Management owns ungodly amounts of ranch land.
And Area 51.
When you get out there, well, all military bases, all national parks, all, yeah, I mean, that all.
They only
that's all
shitload
included.
here in Arizona.
What's that?
I said they only shitload here in Arizona. BLM
Yeah,
all over
the
the
further
place.
west you get, I mean, until you get to California, obviously. I mean, the federal government just owns an ungodly amount out there. Bureau of
Isn't
Land
China and Bill Gates buying all that up though?
Well, that's what was said.
Farmland.
I don't know. I know, was it China that owns more ranch land? I just saw an article about that. Was it China?
No, it's Bill Gates. He owns all the farmland.
Yeah, he's the biggest farmland owner, I believe, in the country.
Right,
now.
right. I know he is.
But China has
But I
bought some
believe
too. though.
China is the biggest foreign
Foreign.
ranch owner, farmland owner in the country, I believe.
That's some scary shit.
It is. It is. But hey. All right. We're gonna keep it non-political.
Non-political, please.
After hours.
So-
After
Anyway, I mean, we could talk about the rules for the territories of the United States for days. But in a nutshell, this is it. This is what Clause 2 of Section 3 alludes to. I was surprised that Puerto Rico does not enjoy the full force of the Constitution, the full benefit of the Constitution. But I mean, the fact is they're just a territory. They're not
Officially a state.
they're not a state, right? So,
That's the same with Guam.
and it was kind of interesting to me that apparently federal government can sell any of their property or territories if they want. So if the federal government, does that mean like if they just decided they wanted to contact the Netherlands and say, hey man, you want to expand yourself out here? You want to buy Puerto Rico? I mean, could they do that? They're a territory. We own it. They're just not a state.
Aren't they considered a protectorate as opposed to a,
I don't know.
U.S.
I don't know the answer to
territory?
that. I don't know the answer to that. That's why I'm asking. I don't know. Because when I was reading that, I was like, man, this just doesn't sound right. That all of a sudden now tomorrow, because we decide we want, $2
Well, to
billion.
go along with that too, though, I mean, so you say like Puerto Rico being a territory, or Guam, or whatever else. So I mean, where do you draw the line as far as, well, you can enjoy these rights, but to a certain point, like you're not fully covered under the Constitution? I mean, is it like the courts can pick and choose what they're covered under?
Well,
or-
I know it's things. I know the one thing I know for sure is that their judges don't, they're not protected for life, right? They don't have jobs for life out there. They don't enjoy the same salary. It's things like that. I think for the most part, I mean, we still make sure that they have a Republican form of government. We still make sure, that if somebody were to attack Puerto Rico, we would certainly respond, right? I mean, Puerto Rico got devastated by, what was that hurricane that came through there? The one where they misappropriated all the funds and stuff, but we certainly, FEMA responded. So I don't think we leave them just completely hanging out, but I know there are sections of the Constitution that do not apply to them. So I don't know. Like I said, we could get into that for a week. I guess unless you're living in Puerto Rico, you probably don't care too much. People in Puerto Rico probably care a little more. Maybe I should start one of these in Puerto Rico.
Bueno.
All right, so moving on to section 4, 846.
Just a quick answer I did find is that the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico is an unincorporated territory, originally classified as a protectorate in 1950. So,
does that mean we can sell them?
Oh, I bet you land's cheap there. We should all move there.
I mean, is that the way I read it?
There's probably
Well,
some good food there.
Listen, I don't want to be a cop.
And a mofongo.
We get notifications on cops that are killed all over, and they include Puerto Rico. And those guys down there, man,
Really?
those guys are getting smoked left and right.
I don't like that.
No, it's bad down there. I mean, people
The
pulling
large
up
cartel?
motorcycles and just killing them. And
Cartel?
what's that? No, I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's just normal criminals. But I question as to what they're, because we do let Puerto Rico govern themselves, right? We let them have
Yes.
their own elections. We don't get involved on that. So I wonder what their training is for their police departments. I just feel like they are not as well trained as their counterparts in the United States. And I don't know that for sure, but some of the things I see, like when there's a robbery going on and two guys just walk right in the store and they get smoked. I mean, we would never walk right in a store when there's a robbery going on unless somebody's shooting, right? We're waiting for them to come out of the store. But these guys just walk right in there, and better than half are killed. They're not wearing vests. They're not. I mean, I get that it's hot, and that's always a problem in these hot climates. And you always hear these chiefs telling their guys, wear your vest, wear your vest. I know it's hot. Guys just don't want to be hot. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. I just feel like they're not as well trained.
Well, there's a high criminal element down there too. I've been there a few times
Oh.
back in the day when I was in the Coast Guard. And I mean, you're like 1 minute you're in like a nice resort area, and then one turn and you are in an area that's very sketchy. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a high poverty rate down there outside of the tourist areas there. So it's just a high crime area.
Yep. For
But
sure.
I'm sure their police departments are like their fire departments. They don't have the same standards and gear that we have either.
And I guess that's weird to me. And I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there. I have no idea. I don't know how it works, but I would like to think that, the federal government gives us grants for vests and things like that. They got to be, I would imagine they take care of them there too.
So
Maybe not. Maybe that's part of the Constitution or part of the deal where they're,
I said Socratic.org indicated that protectorates are independent, but they rely on another country for its defense through treaties. But I don't know that necessarily means it's local law enforcement. I think it's just kind of like national or territory.
well, I know that you said they were a protectorate back in the 50s, but I would imagine right now that if somebody were to invade Puerto Rico, we're not just going to stand idly by.
No, as a protectorate, they rely on us for defense. So we would be, if somebody went and invaded them, we would protect them.
But you said they're not considered a protectorate anymore, right?
No, they are.
They are.
They
as
have
of-
been
yeah,
since that date.
Since
Oh,
1950.
I thought you said that. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought
they
you
were a
said-
territory before, which is they're just administered by the country. But then when they became a protectorate, they followed their own
Okay,
constitution, but they rely on us for.
I got you. I got
Similar
you.
to Bermuda then.
All right, that makes a whole lot more sense to me then.
Mhm.
And they still have local authority over their own affairs.
Right.
But at any time, and we never have, but according to Section 3, I mean, we could go in there at any time and take over. I mean, it says that Congress has the right to, what was it? Where was I? Shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States.
Yep.
So just because we don't get involved doesn't mean we can't. I mean, if things really got out of control down there, I guess we could. And I guess to some extent, we sort of started flexing our muscle when we found out that they were misappropriating all the
Hurricane relief.
all the supplies we sent down there. It's kind of like, look, we're going to let you be in charge. Just know we're really in charge. I kind of feel like that's how it is.
Well, here's a question I've got then. So going back to the Constitution and how it applies down in Puerto Rico, I'm reading here in 1898, following the Spanish-American War, the United States acquired Puerto Rico. Puerto Ricans have been U.S. citizens since 1917 and can move freely between the island and the mainland. So them being U.S. citizens, aren't they then entitled to full protection under the Constitution?
Well, I think we're talking about two
Though the
different things.
territory doesn't acknowledge it 100%?
No, I think we're talking about two different things, right? They are U.S. citizens. They're considered U.S. citizens, which means that they have all the rights afforded them from the Constitution. What we're talking about is on the state level, right? Their
Okay.
judges don't get the same benefits that our judges get. It's things like that.
Didn't we have that question just last week or the week before where would you live if you were a US citizen and you were not in a state? And we were like, well, DC is not a state, but Puerto Rico, you're a US citizen living there,
Mhm.
not truly a state.
So does that apply to
Do they get a
all-
vote?
What's that?
Do they get a vote in the US presidential election?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
but they're not represented in Congress.
But they
Correct?
do get the vote. Guam gets the vote. They have votes, electoral votes too, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, okay, so now there's another thing you're talking about from the Constitution. There's no representative from Puerto Rico that sits in the U.S. Congress.
I think there
Right,
is.
So
I don't
There are
think that's it.
representatives that sit, but they can't vote.
Wait a
Okay.
minute, what?
Well, that's
Puerto
how DC is. DC doesn't get a vote.
Right. He doesn't get to vote, but they do have reps sitting in the Senate and the House of Reps. They just don't get to vote on anything.
No, I don't know though. I know there's.
Then what's the
somebody from
point?
DC. Is there somebody from Puerto Rico there though?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Man, if there is, I've never heard of them.
But they have no voting ability. because they're not a state, but I think they do get to sit in on discussions and so forth.
There are currently 6 non-voting members, a delegate representing the DC, a resident commissioner representing Puerto Rico, and 1 delegate for each of the other 4 permanently inhabited U.S. territories: American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
So
There
they
you
get
go.
1 rep regardless of.
Even though
But they don't get a vote, so what's the point?
Yep, yeah, you're right. They
They
do
have some
vote, but
voice in
you're
there, I
right,
guess.
Jim. They're not represented in the electoral
Well, I
college.
guess that's probably why you never hear about them, right? Because they don't make
Right.
a difference, so nobody ever hears their name. It's not
So
like they're-
essentially, they can bring up issues and suggest.
My guess is they're probably there to
changes.
bring up issues for Puerto Rico, for the
And they
US
get
Virgin
treated-
Islands, for
right,
Guam.
they get treated like eunuchs.
Yeah, basically. Huh.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's obviously it doesn't matter about their population. They only get 1 per territory.
And they're not entitled to any electoral votes for president.
Right.
So what
Well,
is,
that's-
what's the reason they vote then? I mean, why bother to vote?
Probably their local votes. I mean,
Well,
local
for the president though, I mean, our
But they can
policy,
vote for the president, but they don't get electoral votes, they don't count.
Exactly,
So what's the point?
exactly.
Makes them feel good.
residents of Puerto
Well-
Rico do not vote for president.
Oh,
Yeah, they would vote for representatives. Other their representatives.
I bet not. I bet they vote for them, or does the
Hang on, let me
government? I bet the government just sends them.
Probably appointed.
Now they vote for their, obviously they vote for their governors, for their mayors, they vote for their local.
So the non-voting member of the representatives from Puerto Rico is voted on by their citizens. And they serve 4-year terms in the House rather than 2 years.
Okay, but they're
Yeah.
neutered.
Right.
And currently, and they go by the name at large.
give
Jennifer
'em-
Gonzalez Colon is currently Puerto Rico's 1 representative.
I mean, you can give them 20 years, right? I mean, what's he gonna do? He's not gonna do good and he's not gonna do bad.
They don't vote. I think they're just there, if, there was a concern of something, it's their representative.
Hey, we need help with the
Bad.
hurricane relief.
So essentially, they are territory lobbyists.
Basically.
Basically,
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they get a
that would
seat
be it.
in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that would be it. All right. Well, that's what I mean, man. We could talk about territories forever. But I think we probably narrowed it down as to what protections or what they're not getting out of the Constitution that we're getting. It's all state oriented. It's not towards the people. I mean, you've still got their freedom of speech. They've still got, actually, I don't know how what's the Second Amendment like down there? Are you allowed to own guns in Puerto Rico?
I don't
I know
know.
Puerto Rico is a violent state, man.
Apparently, people get shot.
Well, yeah, but those are the criminals with guns, right?
Mhm.
Law-abiding citizens won't shoot other people that don't deserve to be shot. So I don't know.
Even if they've outlawed them, they still have guns with the criminals.
According to USCCA, Puerto Rico is a shall issue unincorporated U.S. territory with concealed weapons permits issued by the Office of Weapons Licenses. Open carry is not legal.
Okay.
You can have guns. You just got to be licensed to carry them.
Right.
Okay.
Right on.
I'm trusting that Google's telling me the truth. Just throwing that out there.
Always,
Check your source.
always.
Check the link that you clicked on.
That one was USCCA, United
Okay,
States Concealed Carry
then you can
Association.
count. Yeah, then I would trust that one.
Well, Google knows what you're going to eat for breakfast tomorrow morning, so
Oh, it sounds.
I'd
good,
trust 'em.
dude. There were a couple things I was researching here that I was asking. Obviously, there were constitutional questions about the impeachment, things like that, and every response I got from Google was Washington Post, New York Times, CNN. Right? You didn't see anything from Mark Levin. You didn't see anything from the Daily Wire. You didn't see anything from any of the conservative sites. So,
About Constitution Center.
if you search for Constitution Center, they'll pop up. But short of that,
Right.
it's ridiculous. All right, so moving on here. So section 4, or Article 4, section 4, and this was a big one. This was a big one over during the election. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. So this was a big one. What they're doing is the Republican form of government that they are guaranteeing you is not Republican Democrat, obviously. It's a type of government where those in government are elected by the people, and the government is set up with 3 separate branches, 3 separate but equal branches of government. The problem was, obviously, in Pennsylvania, the argument was that the judicial branch changed the election laws leading up to the election when it should have been changed through the legislature. That it was this Article 4, Section 4, all day long is the argument as to whether or not that was constitutional. And I think they'll probably find it wasn't, and it'll have to go back to the way it was. Article 4, Section 4 promises that every state will have a Republican form of government. The section also establishes the United States will protect each state from invasion from outside the country and from domestic violence on request from the states, which we also talked about, right? These riots, why we didn't send in troops, why the United States didn't come to their aid. And the answer to that is that nobody asked. They have to ask. Donald Trump offered it up. He told them, look, all you got to do is ask, we'll send them out there. But by Constitution, when we're talking about domestic violence, that is up to the states to control unless they feel they need the help, and then they can.
Get up there and do your homework. I want to tell you something, Dawson, I'm gonna freak out in 2 seconds.
So, anything on that?
Yes. The first part up there. So if they deem the actions in Pennsylvania to be unconstitutional, that's got to be retroactive. Like they got to be able to go back and.
I think the problem was that there was no way for them to prove that they could overturn the election based on that. And that's why the Supreme Court didn't get involved immediately.
Well, just because it doesn't change the outcome doesn't mean, I mean, if I attempted to murder somebody and I didn't succeed, I still attempted to murder somebody. I can be charged with that.
Sure.
So
and
can they go back
I think
and
this will be addressed, but as far as what, when they go back, you mean overturn the election?
No, I didn't say that, but
Would their 20 electoral college votes be then removed from the record?
Taken from the board?
My guess is no, because now you're negating all of the legal votes from the people too, right? I think they would have to come in with some pretty compelling evidence that the number of votes affected by this would have changed the outcome of the election. And I don't think
I'm not saying it would have changed the outcome of the election because he needed more than 20 electoral college swing. I mean, they would, if they took that 20 away, Biden still won. So,
Right, but did it set a precedence?
but it would set a precedence then.
I would love for them to come down so hard on something like this because these states need to follow their own freaking laws.
They do.
Well, it's not even their own laws. They're violating they're violating federal law.
Right.
They're violating Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. Their constitutions mirror this.
And it's not the state violating laws. There's like 4 or 5, 8 people involved in the whole mess
Right.
at the top of the chain.
Right.
Right.
No, and that's where heads should start rolling
Well-
too, because they, I mean, you said that it may not change the way the election happened, and you also might be nullifying all the other legal votes. But I mean, if I'm the one heading up that investigation, I'm going to say, well, hey, sorry, your state legislature screwed up. Blame it on them. We're just holding them accountable.
Your Supreme Court, your state Supreme Court screwed up, and
No.
yeah,
See,
yeah.
I would
I
argue.
think it's a combination.
I would argue that it's only 8 people, right? Listen, the Supreme Court, their state Supreme Court is the one that did this. The legislature absolutely could have come forward and said, wait a freaking minute, man.
Yep.
You guys are out of control. The executive there could have said, look, wrong.
Right.
This is
Exactly.
violating the United States Constitution. This is violating the Pennsylvania state constitution. Nobody did. They allowed it to happen.
This,
So,
my problem with the whole thing is once the state court says, no, you're good to go, like it doesn't go any higher. Like, no, it's a state issue. It's a state issue. But
Well, and they did. They took it higher, but I
then
think
they
the
said no.
problem.
Without,
Yeah,
it's
but
without
I think the problem was how they worded it and how they took it up. It was the same thing with when Texas tried to sue Georgia, right? The Supreme
lack
Court
of
said, we're not going to
standing.
do this because of lack of standing.
Right,
Had they
you need-
worded it right, had they
somebody
worded
from-
it differently, it would have gone through.
Well,
You
wasn't
really
it,
need somebody from
wasn't part of it?
Pennsylvania, executive branch or legislative branch to take it to the Supreme Court.
But-
You need
but-
somebody within the state to take it up and say, hey, this is not the way our Constitution is written in our state, and Supreme Court has overstepped its bound.
But I thought that with Pennsylvania, they said that it needed to be brought up because it had already been allowed in the primaries. They didn't bring it up after the primaries, as what my understanding was with Pennsylvania. If they had raised the issue with the primary,
Well, that was one of the issues. You're right. That
So-
they waited so long.
right?
They said,
And
look,
so-
if this was that important to you, you could have brought it up then. Basically, they waited to see how this was going to shake out. And when it didn't shake out the way they wanted it to shake out, then they brought the case.
Exactly.
And I mean,
Yeah, but my question is so what if what if this happened and those 20 electoral votes did change the swing of who won? Then what? What would they do at
Supreme
this
Court
point?
would 100% have gotten involved at that point.
Yes.
But they're not going to get themselves involved in something that's going to have it's not going to make a difference. I mean, it'll be addressed, but they're not going to get involved in an
That's
emergency.
completely dropping the ball though, no matter what. I mean, it's still one way or another, no matter how many votes it
That's
could
it.
have gotten him or
But
not.
nobody's
it's still
saying they're
election
not
fraud.
going to take it up. What they're saying, you got to remember, man, when all these cases were coming up, when all these challenges were coming up, these were emergency sessions, right? And that is what they were saying was, look, we are not taking this up in an emergency session. It's not going to change the end result of this. We'll see you in court. Had it changed, if
I
it
think
was-
Brad's head's about to explode. He's trying to hold it together.
Yeah, this is. I mean, like they say, well, you should have brought it up earlier. That's when, like, we never know. Like, if they had brought it up earlier, how do we know they wouldn't have just said, "Well, don't worry about it. The election hasn't happened." Like,
Okay,
it's one
but
of those things
how
where
do we know?
we're doing
We don't-
this like
but you can't say
unfalsifiable?
I don't think you can say how do we know. Because what we do know is they didn't bring it up. We'll never know what they were going to say. Maybe they were going to say,
That's
holy
how,
shit.
that's how they can
holy
get
shit,
away
you're
with
right.
justifying this every time. It's like, well, you didn't bring it up beforehand. It's like,
Well, that's what they did with Georgia.
if I
But-
did, the vote hasn't
The
happened.
elections haven't even happened. Why are you bringing it up?
But they're different. But they're different because the same rules that they did with the general election were the same rules that they were allowing in the primaries. So that's why in Pennsylvania they said, yeah, no, you should have brought this up at the primaries. Now Georgia they ran their primaries differently than they ran their general. So they were trying to bring it up in Georgia before that type of situation happened, and that's why they threw it out of Georgia. Now, Pennsylvania, they should have, when they brought it up at the primaries, they should have came right in at the primaries and said, hey, we need, this can't happen, so that it wouldn't have happened in the general. But they didn't. They waited because they were
everything they brought.
okay, now that the emergency,
like,
the
yeah.
urgency is over, now they're going to go back and look at it, and I'm sure that everybody's going to get hammered on it now.
What case made it to the Supreme Court?
What do you mean?
I
Out
don't.
of all the election fraud, all the election
I
irregularities.
don't think they've heard one yet.
No,
They
they didn't.
There was
None of
one
them
that he
won.
won, I think.
It's like this stuff happens all the time. This is the biggest thing to happen in our country. Every 4 years, we have legitimate concerns, and
Mhm.
nobody wants to hear the case because they don't want to step on things. Even though, like, we look at this, we go, they're not following the Constitution. They're not following their own
Yeah.
laws. They're not following their own rules, and everybody just punts it. They're just like, nah.
But I think they are going to, though. I just don't think that they were going to do it urgency.
Biden's the president.
Well, yeah, but the election's been over for months.
Well,
you
yeah.
got to handle it in the moment, and then everybody punted. Every single person that handled
Right.
No, here's my only, and I've said it before, I have to believe still Trump's legal team has never shown the American public what their evidence is. And I have to believe that, I mean, we have an
Watch
original-
Mr. Pillow.
we have an originalist court up there. Oh yeah, Mike Lindell. But we have an originalist court up there. And had they actually had the evidence they said they had, I can't believe that 60 courts would have said no. The only thing I can figure is that they don't have the evidence that they're claiming they have.
I'm with you, Jim. That's what's kind of made me kind of move on from the
Well, you
whole
might
thing
not,
is
but
that, I mean, what are the chances that out of 60, 59 of them are turned down? And yet we still, and you know how Trump is. If he's going to lose, he's going to go down swinging. He's going to say, screw it, release the hounds and release the information we have. And nothing's been brought out.
Yeah.
Right.
But-
And Brad, you're talking about just the Supreme Court, right? But we've had a lot of courts that have heard this. They've heard their cases. They just ruled against the Trump campaign. And you can't say that they're all liberal courts because they're not.
I
There
won't
were a
say
lot of conservative courts that said,
it
you
just
don't have
it
enough.
boggles my mind how many cases got presented
well,
and
I guess that's what I'm saying.
and nothing. Yeah, I'm not saying that there's enough evidence to overturn it. It just boggles my mind that we see this. Like we have eyes. We look at these. We see all these irregularities. We know this is fishy as hell. And I'm not saying there's enough to overturn the election. Trump's personality very likely lost him the election regardless, right? Like I'm not. But you see all these irregularities, and nothing in any election has changed thus far. They made all these changes in no time.
Well,
for
one thing-
reasons, and now it's like,
Scared of the backlash.
One thing I did see today was there was a Republican rep from Michigan who's putting out a bill for auditing or integrity, something along those lines. She said, you know, after a football game, you go through and you look at the film and you analyze what went wrong, what went good, and you make adjustments. And I know she's bringing that. So I know that I think after this, they can't not address it. I know this is something that they're going to address, but I still want to know when they're going to look at the Article 4, Section 4 against Pennsylvania's basically ruling from the bench. I mean, they're going to have to look at it.
Hey, Renee, a referee can apologize all they want 5 days after the game, but it's
Yeah.
too late.
It's like kicking the dog an hour after it's pooped in your house. Like this, it's not helpful. We needed to
Well,
fix
in
what
fairness, if
happened
I
in
walked in,
November.
my dog pooped in my house while I was gone for an hour, I would probably kick him. I wouldn't.
Yes, you would.
But it might make you feel better, but the dog did not learn it or understand
That
it.
dog is gonna be like,
That's my
why am I in my
point.
cage?
Yeah, but
And for the record, I would never kick my sweet dog, but
yeah, I think that they're going to have to address, I mean,
I've lost faith at this point because we can't get we can't get
Well,
voter
and I guess
You
that's it.
can't.
That's why when you guys are saying this stuff and I'm just shaking my head, I don't have faith in the system. I don't think the system's.
There we go. I mean, and that's my problem. It's like
I don't.
all the shenanigans, and everybody's just like, well, we got the result we wanted.
I'm on board with you, Brad. I think just like you do. How can we sit here and see it? We're just lay people and people involved can't. I don't get it.
Well, Becky, this is exactly what I say, right? There's only one way to fix this, and that is to start over.
Primary them out.
That is to primary every single one of them out. And let's start over with new people that are going to listen to the Constitution.
Try every voting
abide by the
session.
Constitution.
You got a bunch
Okay.
of idiots that keep
Okay, but
electing the
you
people.
say you're trying, but you can't do it. You got to talk to your friends. You got to hold groups, man. Get people, meet up.
Hey,
You
I
hold
had-
groups.
I had Lorinda not speaking to me until Biden got in office.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think I think part of the issue, and I'm totally with Brad, because here's the thing. It reminds me of what's going on currently. I mean, we've all talked about it and what they did as far as the voting for the impeachment. There was no evidence. There was nothing. It was just like, are we going to do this? Yeah, we're going to do this. Okay. Some of those Supreme Courts wouldn't even give them the opportunity to present any evidence. So they just denied hearing it, period. And that's the fear here, is that how many
Well-
Supreme Courts that they went to and how many denied it. And the thing is that clearly some people saw that there was evidence, because like in Wisconsin, he lost by one person. It was a 5-4 vote. I mean, it's not like people didn't think that there was something going on.
Well, and it's just, if you think about it, at some point they had to take everything into the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. They had to present it first to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And you know what the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said?
Hmm.
We didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong here. And you don't have standing. Thank you. Goodbye.
Right.
So at that point, you're forced to go to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
The U.S. Supreme Court said, it's 20 electoral votes. It's not going to change the end of it. We'll see you in the summer sometime because, it doesn't really matter what way we vote on this at this point. It's not going to change the election.
And I think that was it. I think they weren't willing to hear this in an emergency session.
That's what bugs me about all this, because if you're not going to take these little cases where they're screwing it up, it's just going to grow. It's like a
Well,
cancer.
they are going to take it. I believe they
They
will take
will.
it.
I believe so too. That's why I think
Take it now.
they
Don't-
cannot ignore it. They cannot ignore it. They,
Renee, what do you think? Is this post-discussion stuff? Should we move on?
yeah, we
Yes.
probably should. We should probably close and,
We're at 9:15. We're talking about the
Yeah,
same
we're-
thing.
yeah.
I'm all about talking about it, but we'll just close this one out so that we don't go too long.
Let's
Yeah,
just wait
hop over
until
to the-
mid-March.
And I will see you guys.
all right, I'm going to stop recording and we'll,
Yep,
we'll
I'll see you
post.
guys over there.
I'll post
Are
the
you
link over
putting up
there.
a new post?